Good morrow, good sirs and super friends. This is Lady Protagonist.
And the Accidental Mailman.
And this is Superhero or Not. Using science, melted crayons, and various lengths of wire, we've come up with a fail-proof formula to determine the age-old existential question, superhero or not. Today we're talking about the original outlaw, the bad boy who's really a good boy. We're talking about the sheriff-evading philanthropist in tights, Robin Hood.
Of course, Robin Hood has inspired actual superheroes, Green Arrow and Hawkeye to name a few, but is the medieval legend a superhero himself? Let's find out. My favorite Robin Hood depiction is probably the one from Disney's animated Robin Hood film.
That's a pretty good one.
Yeah, I like the little song that he sings while he's bopping through the forest with Little John the Bear.
You mean Baloo?
Yeah, basically Baloo from Jungle Book.
So what's the song? I don't remember it.
I don't remember it either. The only parts I remember is like Robin Hood and Little John walking through the forest, yippee dappa doopy 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 day. But I don't remember the actual words.
No, I think that's actually just it verbatim.
Yeah.
The yippee dappa doopa dappa doopy dappa day.
That's probably it.
That's beautiful. Well, I wanted to start things off by telling you about what I've been spending all my time doing, which is a lot of Robin Hood media. But I also thought a little quiz might be fun for us to do about movies and TV.
Okay.
So to prep for this episode, I watched a ton of movies and TV shows. We're talking Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves, everybody's favorite retelling that was super ridiculous, but not on purpose. Subsequent Men in Tights, Mel Brooks. That one was everyone's favorite retelling, but it was purposefully ridiculous. Of course, Disney's Robin Hood. I watched Robin Hood Beyond Sherwood, which had a magical dragon and a parallel universe. It was actually pretty good. But it also terrible, you know.
At the same time. Sci-Fi Channel?
It was a theatrical release.
Okay.
I think it was just in another country. Yeah. I also watched the very laughable 2018 retelling of Robin Hood that just featured a lot of H&M outfits. I also watched Wishbone's Paw Prince of Thieves.
Oh,
it's a great episode. It's a really great episode. Gotta love Wishbone.
I take it back. That might be my favorite Robin Hood.
What's the story, Wishbone? So one of the other things I watched was several episodes of the British TV show called Robin Hood. It had like 3 seasons, I think, from 2006 to 2009, and something crazy happened. Do you want to take a guess about what happened with the making of the Robin Hood series?
During the making of? Robin Hood stole from the producers and gave to the camera crew.
That is really close. What happened is the first season, they actually filmed it and they had 13 episodes. And so they were editing them in Budapest in Hungary. And somebody stole 4 of the 13 episodes. And not only did they steal them, but they asked for a ransom.
Dang.
Yeah, so they wanted £1 million to return all 4 episodes. The production was like, what the hell? Here's £40,000? We have £40,000? That's all these things are worth? They were like, no dice. We're not going to give you these tapes back. But turns out a couple months later, the Hungarian police actually just found the tapes. So there was no money exchanged. But there was a real life robbery and ransom happening on the set.
Interesting. And then the thieves just gave up and tossed them out.
Yeah, I couldn't find any information about if anyone was arrested, but I thought that was kind of fun.
That was pretty fun. I was trying to look up some stuff about the Robin Hood television series. Mainly I was trying to look up how to pronounce Guy Gisborne's name, but I couldn't find any clips of the actual show on YouTube, but apparently he's like a really attractive actor and people like to make like music videos with footage of him from the show.
Really?
Yeah.
Do you know what other character he plays that's really famous?
No.
He is the lead dwarf in The Hobbit.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, Richard Armitage.
Armitage, yeah.
Yeah, that's really crazy. I would love to see some of these videos someday. So there are several movies and TV shows I actually didn't get to watch, and I thought it'd be really fun if we did maybe a little quiz just to see if you're up on current Robin Hood times.
Of course.
How many silent films were there with the theme of Robin Hood between 1908 and 1918?
Ooh, that's a really short period of time, but I'm gonna say I'll give you a good ol' 3.
Close. There are 5 silent films about Robin Hood specifically. Pretty crazy that just in 10 years, they were like, let's make some more Robin Hood films. Let's do this thing. Next question. True or false? Is there a depiction of Robin Hood's son who is a musician?
True. And his name is Elvis Presley.
So close. His name is Sparrow Hood.
Okay.
And his band is called, of course, the Merry Men. And he was depicted in Ever After High.
Oh, okay.
True or false? Is there a movie called Princess of Thieves?
I think I'm going to have to give you my first false.
That's wrong. Princess of Thieves starring Keira Knightley as Robin Hood's daughter, Gwen.
Interesting. All right.
Really happened. So, in Tiny Toon Adventures, what was the name of the sheriff?
Oh, he wasn't just the sheriff of Nottingham.
No, it was a special name he had.
Maybe he was the sheriff of Yesingham.
The sheriff of Naughty Ham.
Naughty
Like,
Ham.
he's naughty.
Okay. All right. That's not the worst thing ever.
Okay, what else do we got? So, there is a space age version of Robin Hood who lived where?
Sherwood Space Station.
The Sherwood asteroid, and this was called Rocket Robin Hood. Yeah, it was supposed to be in the year 3000.
Okay, that sounds like the best one so far.
Not bad. All right, true or false? There was a Pink Panther version of Robin Hood.
That's gotta be true.
Definitely. Pinkham Tax. All right, true or false? There was a movie called Robin Hood and the Seven Hoods. It was a musical film set in 1930s gangster Chicago.
I've heard worse ideas for a movie. I guess I'm gonna guess that's true.
That's absolutely true. And guess who starred as Robbo, the lead gangster? Old Blue Eyes, Frank Sinatra.
Oh, okay.
Up the Blank was a 1971 parody of Robin Hood.
Up the arrows.
Up the Chastity Belt. All right,
There you
you
go.
got some right and you got some wrong. I didn't take score. So congratulations.
All right. I feel accomplished.
You should. Okay, let's hit the special formula. What's up first?
First on the list is, does Robin Hood have an origin story? Like all good superheroes, Robin Hood does have an origin story. And that origin is, he's mentioned in a lot of ballads.
What do you mean by ballad?
Well, I guess back in the day, the 1300s in medieval England, they just kind of like played music and sang to each other. And from my research, he's mentioned in a lot of them. They can't exactly nail down, no one wrote the genesis of Robin Hood or kept track of that. One of the first ones was A Guest of Robin Hood, which is circa 1500, which is a collection of separate stories. But that even doesn't include some of the earliest stories like The Monk or The Potter or Guy of Gisborne. And those early Robin Hood ones, he's just a commoner. He's not a knight or a peasant. Some of the later stuff you'll see, he kind of like has noble lineage, or he's like trying to fight for the return of the King Richard or whatever, but the early ballads don't really support that theory that he supports the king or anything. But from the beginning, he is on the side of the poor. The guest of Robin Hood quotes him as instructing his men that when they rob, and here's a quote in Old English, "Look ye do no husband harm that tilleth with his plough. No more ye shall no good yeoman that walketh by Grenwood Shaw. Nay, no knight, nay, no squire, that will be a good fellow." And then in the final lines, it says, "He was a good outlaw and did poor men much good."
So he was a good guy.
Yeah, even in his origins, he was a pretty good guy.
So Yeoman, I learned through this research, is actually a word for basically the middle class back in medieval England.
Okay. Yeah, that's what I was reading, and he's just kind of like, you were either a peasant or a servant or something, or you were, somebody who's above the law or the law, like the sheriff or the king or a knight or something like that.
Yeah, like nobility.
Yeah, and Robin Hood's just, became an outlaw. And while researching his origins, it kind of struck me that perhaps the quality of being intended for children might be important in, like, the genesis of a superhero. Because a lot of the early stuff, the ballads and stuff, he was just kind of running with his boys, his merry men, Little John and the Friar Tuck and all those guys. He's just kind of causing trouble. And it wasn't until the mid-19th century when the Robin Hood legend was specifically adapted for children that he was kind of stamped as that, like, philanthropist who, like, takes from the rich and gives to the poor, or has a noble birth, or in a lot of them, like, what was the Robin Hood film we watched?
Prince of Thieves?
Yeah, where he just kind of, like, leads the oppressed people into revolt against the overlords and stuff, and I think in Wishbone he did that too, but...
Always Wishbone.
Yeah, it's kind of like, once it's been adapted for children, they kind of, like, make him more hero-like, when in the original he was just not necessarily a person who existed historically, but just this tale of, like, what if this outlaw did this? Yeah.
So a lot more family-friendly towards the mid 19th century.
In my opinion, I found if you're asking about his origins, not necessarily superhero-like, more neutral, but overall... the entire canon of Robin Hood, yeah, he's got some superhero origins.
So what was the first mention of Robin Hood?
Oh, I didn't write it down, but somebody's poem or something?
Piers Plowman? It was like a ballad, a poem, and it was just a couple lines, actually. And so I have the Old English that I read, and then kind of the translation. This is Old English. This is going to sound ridiculous, but I'm going to read it. I can't not part fitly my pater noster, as be priest it sing be. But I can rhymes of Robin Hood and Randolph, Earl of Cheshire. This was Sloth. He was a drunken priest, and he was trying to say, hey, I don't know my Lord's Prayer, and I can't sing it like a priest, but I know rhymes and stories of Robin Hood and another folk hero, Randolph, Earl of Cheshire. And so it still remains the earliest mention of England's most famous outlaw hero. But as we know, these ballads, these folk tales, etc., they were orally passed down through generations, through minstrels, through other folks.
Yeah, so by him referencing Robin Hood, it's just like pop media or whatever. That's what they had back in the day. Instead of turning on the Jersey Shore, they just sang ballads about Robin Hood instead of saying their prayers.
So instead of saying like RuPaul, they said Robin Hood.
Yeah.
Gotcha. So would you say that Robin Hood gets a check in this origin story category?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, that's one in our 10-point formula. Next up on the list is secret identity.
And this is a quick one. Robin Hood does not have a secret identity. I mean, you could try to make an argument that he does, but I would say, that's not a good argument.
It's a no.
He is Robin Hood. That's who he is. That's who he was. That's who he will be.
That's 0 for that category. That's 1 out of 2. Not terrible so far. Next up is, does he wear a mask or have a costume? So Robin Hood did not officially wear a mask, although he is often depicted as being in a village disguised to fool the sheriff. He has a couple signature things about his costume. One of them is Robin's hat. It's called a bicocket, and it was very popular in medieval England. It's a hat worn by Robin in Disney's Robin Hood. So that kind of like triangular hat with the big feather sticking out of it.
Okay, it kind of comes to a point in the front.
That's right. So that is the bicocket. It became really popular, especially in early 14th century. It was worn by several different social and economic classes. So that was kind of a novelty back then. That didn't happen very often. Because usually you could look at someone and know what class they were in, but the bicocket, everybody's like, I gotta have one of those.
Huh.
Yeah, so the other thing that's kind of cool about the bicocket is both men and women wore it. So the actual hat itself was made of wool, although you always see Robin in a green version. The most popular colors at the time were red, blue, and gray.
Interesting.
And then a fun fact, early Robin Hood stories never actually mentioned a bicocket hat. They never talked about it. So it's more of this modern addition to the Robin Hood image that's just pulled from like what was popular dress at the time period.
Wow.
It was a bicocket.
Not like an outlaw specific uniform or anything?
No, there was no official outlaw uniform. Though, the color of Robin's costume, his little outfit, is almost always depicted as green, in a special green. It's called Lincoln green. And the reason why it's called Lincoln green is because it's the color of dyed woolen cloth that originated in Lincoln, England, which was about 40 miles northeast of Nottingham. And so Lincoln was a huge cloth town during the Middle Ages. Lincoln was the place.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and so that's why you always see Robin Hood in Lincoln green. So he did, in fact, wear a costume.
Okay, so does he get a point for having a costume like a superhero would?
Oh, yeah. So that's definitely a point for wearing a costume.
Okay.
Next up, does he have a sidekick or is he in a crime-fighting group? Well, I think we all know the answer to that one.
Yeah, I was just gonna say.
Heck yeah, it's Robin Hood and the Funky Bunch. I mean, Robin Hood and the Merry Men. So the Merry Men, let's talk about them. There were, by some stories, 7 score merry men. Do you know how much a score is?
Wow, I thought I did. Is it 14?
It is not 14, it is 20. 140 members, 7 score merry men.
That's wild.
That is wild. So it is absolutely wild, although there were a few that were like the go-to, the ones everybody knows. So let's talk about them.
Okay.
Most famous was Little John. In some stories, Little John is actually 7 feet tall. He's always kind of this big, burly guy. He is Robin Hood's main companion, and if anyone was a sidekick, it would be Little John. There's actually a statue in Sherwood Forest, the Sherwood Forest in Nottingham, of Robin and Little John fighting on a bridge. And there's actually a really long grave in a churchyard in Derbyshire where they're like, hey, Little John was a real person, and this is where he died. And so it's like a 7-foot-long grave with a marker that's like, here lies Little John.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's total tourist trap. But anyways, back to the fighting on the bridge. Basically, how Robin Hood added people to his band of merry men is he fought them and then lost. Like, everyone he fought and lost, he was like, hey, man, good fight, buddy. Do you want to be part of my group? The next person that he added, Will Scarlet. So Will Scarlet, this is the Christian Slater kind of angsty character from Prince of Thieves.
Okay.
But in a lot of stories, Will Scarlet was just like this young dude. He was dressed in like red frilly clothes. Most people believed that all of the characters named Will in the ballads that you were talking about earlier are Will Scarlet. So we're talking Scarlet, Scarlock, Scadlock, and Shacklock, even Will Stutely. People say that this is all the same person, just misspellings.
Sounds really similar.
Yeah, misspellings of Will's name. So in some stories, he's Robin's cousin or nephew. In the H&M version of Robin Hood in 2018, he's the bad guy who stole Robin's girl while he was away, and he's like cool with the status quo. But in the movie, he actually becomes the new sheriff. So that's the one depiction where he was not so cool. We also have Much the Miller's son. So Much is common in the ballads and all of the stories.
Yeah, I read about him too.
He was often referred to as other names like Midge or even Nick the Miller's son, but people think it's all Much.
Yeah, when I was reading about it, the characters that instantly told me besides Robin Hood were Little John and Much. And it made me think like, oh, and all the like modern depictions of Robin Hood, I can't think of one that had Much.
Yeah, Much is kind of a comic relief in some of the newer versions of the story. In the older versions, he's actually really not so comic. He's strong enough to like pick up Little John. He's super violent. Like at one point, he beheads someone just because he wanted them to stay quiet. Yeah, he's like super hardcore. So in addition to Much and Will and John, you have good old Friar Tuck. So Friar Tuck is this holly jolly dude. He was smart and like down to party. In a lot of stories, he's also the comic relief. In some stories, he's like a super badass fighter who bested Robin Hood with his like not only his smarts but his athletic ability. And so that's one of the other ways that Friar Tuck becomes part of the band. Robin's like, oh man, you got me. The other thing I'm going to say about Friar Tuck is that at first glance, having a friar as part of your gang is like a really odd choice to me. Like, well, who wants an old friar? But if you're looking at the Robin Hood myth from nowadays, sure. But back then, the church was actually the center of life. Everything revolved around the church. The church was in everything, responsible for education, welfare, governance. It did everything. So having a friar on his side was important and also strategic. Another merry man was Alan a Dale. So he is a later addition to the Tales of Robin Hood. He is a minstrel often.
Wow, okay. He wants to hang out with the band of merry men.
Yeah, he is a minstrel. He's also a star-crossed lover. So he's often depicted in a story where he's like this star-crossed lover who like wants to marry his fiancée, but his fiancée she was promised someone else. And then Robin and the merry men actually break up the wedding and they just like pick Alan Adele up and be like, you're now the groom.
Seems like a silly episode of Robin Hood. That's not really like related to the main plot of, thwarting the sheriff or whatever.
Yeah, it's definitely a subplot in the sitcom of Robin Hood.
Yeah.
So, movies and TV versions also added a Muslim character. And this is probably, because they talked often about the Crusades. Robin going on the Crusades and coming back. So, they added a Muslim character and most notably played, of course, by Morgan Freeman in Prince of Thieves.
Oh, yeah.
Which, by the way, the BBC History magazine gave a score of 2 out of 10 for accuracy. The other person, of course, is Maid Marian. She's also a later addition to folktales and stories. She's a skilled fighter. In some stories, Robin and Marian have known each other since they were children. In other stories, they met when Robin was outlawing about. In films and TV, Marian is really a huge part of the plot. She's like a huge reason why Robin does things.
Yeah.
So it's kind of interesting how they have this kind of commercialization of Robin Hood and he has to get the girl and he has to save the damsel in distress.
Exactly. Yeah. I feel like as time goes on and people rework their versions of it, they just kind of fit Robin Hood into these molds. Which is fair, characters and stories evolve, but the original one was a lot more simple.
Maid Marian was the last on that list. So as far as having a sidekick and in a crime-fighting group, that's a definite yes on our formula. So definitely gets a point there.
So you said that everyone who joins this group is someone who beat him in combat?
Pretty much. I mean, in a lot of the main ballads, yes.
Okay. So he's like the weakest one in his group.
That's a great observation.
But they're just like, this guy's the leader, even though we've all beat him.
He is the visionary.
Yeah.
Good old Robin Hood.
They know that they can all beat him, but they're just like, well, we're 100 guys, we'll let him lead us around anyway.
I mean, you make a good point. Should we write him a letter?
I think he's dead.
What? All right, let's move on. Next on our list is the hero or potential hero. Great with the ladies or attractive. I'm gonna say no, and here's why. As we know, we just talked about Maid Marian. So that's the main love interest everyone knows about in almost every modern retelling of Robin Hood. But in a couple stories, actually, Robin's love interest is Clorinda. She's a queen of the shepherdess. She is a skilled archer. She's a huntswoman. She's also a badass. But as a lot of people have pointed out, that was just Marian and she was in disguise. So they really want to believe that Maid Marian was part of all of these stories.
Wait, you said she's a queen of something?
Queen of the shepherdess. Shepherds, they're kind of more nomadic. They take care of animals, animal husbandry.
But some people have the opinion that was just Maid Marian's secret identity.
Yeah, but here's the thing. Robin Hood's main squeeze wasn't Clorinda or Maid Marian. He loves the Holy Mother, Virgin Mary.
Okay.
Yeah. Almost all of England was Roman Catholic. Many of the tales that we're talking about were written in the 15th and 16th century, but Robin Hood was supposed to exist in the, 12th century, 13th century.
Mm-hmm.
So Protestant Reformation didn't happen in England until the 1500s. That's the 16th century. So for some context, Henry VIII, good old Henry, his first marriage was in 1509, and Martin Luther posted his magical pamphlet on a German church door in 1517. Catholicism was really important. Like I said before, the church was a huge part of life. So Robin Hood was super religious. In several stories, he actually went to fight in the Crusades, like we talked about earlier.
Mm-hmm.
The Crusades, they were literal wars fought over religion between Christians and Muslims. And so a little background there were 8 Crusades. They happened between 1096 and 1291. And this is the time of religious fighters like the Knights Templar. So we're talking those guys with chainmail and the big crosses on their shirts. Like, these guys were like protecting the Holy Land.
The Holy Wars.
Yeah, they were meant to protect pilgrims going on a pilgrimage to Jerusalem, to Holy Land, to talk to God or whatever it is you do.
Yeah, just kind of go in there and change anybody's mind who doesn't agree about who lives upstairs.
Yeah, listen, the Crusades were really more of a land grab in the Middle East for England than anything. So Robin Hood was into God, or more so God's mom, the Virgin Mary. So that was really his main lady in most of the stories.
And is that a unique viewpoint, or is there a lot of people who are into the Virgin Mary specifically? Like, is that a special characteristic to him?
I don't think it was necessarily a special characteristic to him, but in stories, I do think it was.
For them to write down, like, Robin Hood prayed to the Virgin Mary, they'd be like, oh, that's a quality of Robin Hood. You wouldn't just think like Robin Hood eats food,
Right. So I'll give you a little bit of Old English again. Let's get my Old English going here. So this is an excerpt from the same text we talked about earlier, A Just of Robin Hood, or Hode, as it's spelled, Hode. This was printed in the late 1400s. But here is how you get to know Robin and his lady love. A good manner then had Robin in Lund, where that he were, every day or he would die, 3 masses would he hear. The one in worship of the Father, and another of the Holy Ghost, the third of our dear Lady, that he all there loved most. Robin loved our dear Lady, for doubt of deadly sin would he never do company harm that any woman was in. Here's this guy, he loves the Virgin Mary so much that he would never harm a woman. Like, okay. That's his love for women. Is where it comes from, is the Virgin Mary.
If he's taught the Holy Trinity, the Father, the Mother, and the Holy Ghost, he's attracted
That's not
to
the
the
Holy
ladies.
Trinity, actually.
Well, I don't know.
It's the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit.
Okay, well, where does the Virgin Mary fit in?
She's the mom of the Father.
Okay.
She's the father mother.
She's the baby mama.
She's the baby mama's, yeah.
She's the holy baby mama.
She's holy baby mama.
And he likes the ladies, and if that's what motivates him to
be a better person, not be a jerk to women, sure.
Religion's not all bad.
Religion's not all bad. So, yeah, the question truly is he great with the ladies? I'm still going to say no. He does love the ladies, however, and that's not the same thing. So I think he gets a 0 in that category.
Yeah.
All right, next up, what do we got?
Is Robin Hood, like any good superhero, selfless? My answer is yes, mostly. Because one of his main qualities through the years is he steals from the rich and he gives to the poor. Like I explained in his origin, he doesn't rob from the poor, and in a couple of the tales he does give money to poor people who need it, or people who are in trouble who need it. But I guess you could say that by being an outlaw and committing crimes, that's not the most selfless thing you could do. That's why I say yes, mostly.
Yes, mostly.
Yeah, because when you think of Robin Hood, like, the number one thing you think of is stealing from the rich and giving to the poor. And that's going on anyway. You could keep that treasure for yourself, so.
All right, so point in selfless category. We have origin story, yes. Secret identity, no. Wears a costume or a mask, yes. Crime fighting group, heck yeah. Great with the ladies, no. Selfless, yes. So next on the list is, does he have a superpower? The answer is no, but I think this question really couples best with the next question, which is, what is their signature move or equipment? Even though Robin does not have a superpower, he was super talented with the longbow, and that is his signature equipment. Let's go into the longbow. I want to just warn you and tell you that I am now obsessed with archery and longbows, and I have ordered a bow and some arrows from Amazon.
Nice.
It's coming. I'm kind of obsessed. Anyways, so let's talk about what we know about longbows and Robin's particular talent. So because longbows were made of wood, and basically used until they fall apart. No English longbows survive from the period when the longbow was like the most dominant. So this was like 1250 to 1450. That's when the longbow was the jam. So most of what historians knew about the longbow has actually been speculation. One of those things is, for example, several thought that they were like 5 feet long. You know, that's pretty long, 5 feet. But luckily, there are some bows that survive from the Renaissance period, and we came upon them in a very interesting way. Have you ever heard of the Mary Rose?
No.
So the Mary Rose was a ship. It was one of Henry VIII's naval ships, and it sank at Portsmouth in 1545. And from that shipwreck, they excavated more than 3,500 arrows and 137 whole longbows.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, so they actually recovered literal longbows from the Renaissance period. And some historians were surprised because they found out that the average length of these bows was 6 feet 6 inches. So a foot and a half longer than they thought. And the draw power of the bows that they found were a lot more devastating than they previously believed. So, the longbow. It actually is not English. It originated in Wales. The Welsh used it to fight off attacks from the English before the end of the 11th century. So that's when the English really recognized, hey, this thing has awesome power. And then they took it and made it their own. So they adopted it. It became their weapon of choice for several years. The longbow was actually around during the time of Robin Hood, so that's important, but it wasn't fully to the army. So the longbow would have been a bit of a novelty for people to see.
Okay, so these outlaws are on the cutting edge by arming themselves with that.
They're on the cutting edge. They probably just picked it up from some dead Welsh dude on the field of battle. And they're like, hey.
Do you know if the English, used archery in general?
They did use archery in general, but the longbow was something they had never seen before until the Welsh used it against them.
And Robin Hood has been specifically been told having a long bow.
So longbow in most of the stories, though in later depictions, his bow is smaller. There's a reason why that happens, and especially for film, and we'll get to that. Throughout much of what is considered the golden age of the longbow, a large proportion of longbowmen were deployed in English armies. They were actually mostly Welsh. So Welsh were still considered the best longbowmen in the land. They just kind of said, hey guys, come fight for us. Give us your magical talents. And then as kind of the decades passed and these people fought for the English, it became the English longbow. And that's how people recognize it today, really, is they call it the English longbow. One of the things that made the English longbow so devastating was its ability to do crazy amount of damage from 250 yards away. This is a crazy amount of space when you're talking about medieval fighting.
Yeah.
And so the knights, they had no protection against arrows of the longbow because they could pierce armor, they could take down horses,
holy cow,
they could pierce chainmail. They were seriously devastating. Think about a longbow, it being 6 feet, 6.5 feet long, and they were made actually custom made to the height of the archer. Arrows were 3 feet long.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, really powerful. And they say that the English longbow was normally made of yew, whereas Welsh, usually they were elm, just because of what was available at the time.
Mm-hmm.
They had a string that was made of hemp, usually, and it was soaked in glue for some reason, which I thought was interesting. And so what you do with a longbow, it's not the same. You don't move your body the same way. You know how a normal bow where you hold it and you pull back the arrow and your arm is really doing most of the work, your dominant arm, right?
Okay, yeah, the one that's pulling back the string.
Yeah, so that's not the way that you use a longbow. And I actually watched a ton of YouTube videos and got super obsessed with the way longbowmen work. So there's some top archery people that have used rebuilt longbows so they can kind of figure out what the dynamics were.
Yeah.
Because they're so heavy, they had 100 to 200 pounds of draw weight. What they call draw weight. So that weight behind that 3-foot arrow, that's how they could pierce armor and take down horses.
Wow.
So what they would do, because that was so much tension, they couldn't aim and just be boom, let's hold it for a second, take that big deep breath that you're supposed to take before you let an arrow go. they had to like not yet fully pull the arrow back. Their longbow pointed towards the sky.
Oh, okay.
They would notch it up on their knuckle and then bring it down. And as they brought the entire bow down to their body, that's when they were pulling with all of their body weight against that arrow and against that string.
Holy cow.
And then they immediately let it go. Like, they could not hold that arrow for very long. It was seconds.
So they had to aim as they're pulling down.
Yeah, and that's why long bowmen were actually lifelong bowmen. Like, they've found skeletons that are completely deformed that were long bowmen skeletons. Their arms are deformed, their shoulders are hunched. The way that they held their bodies constantly, they wreck their bodies because of it. There is a really interesting skeleton, like rebuilt kind of in England in a museum, and it has bone spurs in their left wrists, their shoulders and ring fingers. There's tons of bone spurs because of the way they were holding the bow. So a capable archer with a long bow would have been able to fire 12 arrows, about 10 to 12 arrows per minute. So think about, just like for those of you who can't see me because I'm getting really into this, you're looking up to the sky, you have this long bow, you bring it down and shoot, and then it's just automatic, do it again, do it again. So the reason why they were so good and precise is because of repetition. They just continuously did it, and that's how they were able to really know where they were throwing that arrow.
It's like at the level of like an athlete, yeah.
A very like well-oiled machine. Robin Hood's reputation was like expert marksman. That's why they thought he had military training, like in the Crusades, etc.
Oh.
And so that's why they thought, like, perhaps, you know, he was in the military before.
That would explain his longbow techniques.
Yeah, and according to legend, the wood from the yew tree for Robin's longbow was from a churchyard, a sacred churchyard. In that churchyard, the trees there were known for like their symbolic spiritual qualities, which is why that kind of lends itself to this myth and legend of Robin Hood having this magical expert marksmanship with the longbows, because he had this magical bow made of yew from a special church.
Really? Okay.
Mm-hmm. So that's the longbow story, and that's Robin's signature equipment and signature move. I'd say no superpower necessarily, but definitely a signature piece of equipment. What's next on our list?
Next up on the list is, does he have a nemesis? And that's another really easy one. The answer is yes. His nemesis is always depicted as the Sheriff of Nottingham, which, you know, is another character that they can't prove really existed, like Robin Hood. He's just generally depicted as an unjust tyrant who subjects the people of Nottingham to unaffordable taxes.
Yeah, he was a jerk.
Yeah, he's just always getting tricked by Robin Hood and his merry men, or killed, or whatever, depending on the ballad. Sometimes he's even depicted in assisting Prince John, who is the King Richard's evil brother. Richard's away at the Crusades or wherever he's at.
Yeah, he like usurped the throne for a little while.
Yeah. So, like we were talking about later on, Robin Hood is, you know, respectful of King Richard and is just trying to defeat the bad sheriff and Prince John. Another nemesis that Robin Hood had is Guy of Gisborne.
Yeah, Richard Armitage.
He's hired to kill Robin Hood, but he's killed by him, and like you mentioned in some movies, he's a romantic rival. So yeah, I would say, along with stealing from the rich and giving to the poor, being good at archery, a very core Robin Hood trait is having a nemesis. That's the Sheriff of Nottingham.
Nice. So he's got a lot of points racked up. We have origin story, yes. Secret identity, no. We have wear a mask, yes. Has a sidekick or crime fighting group, yes. Ladies, no. Superpower and signature move, that's a no and a yes. Selfless,
Yes.
has a nemesis, yes. So what's last on our list?
Last up is, does he save lives?
Does he save lives? The answer is sometimes. So he saves some lives and doesn't spare others. In some of the stories and ballads, Robin Hood is like a straight up murderer. You know, some of those earlier stories before the Disney washing of everything.
Most of them, yeah. Like I was going to say when I was talking about Guy of Gisborne, that's a real short ballad from what I could tell, where he just cuts off his head and shows up in town with it.
He's like, hey, here's the head.
That's a normal thing for him.
Super normal. So there's one about Robin entering an archery contest with a ton of the sheriff's men. And he's like, check me out. I'm really great at archery. And they're like, meh, whatever, kid. And then he like splits their arrows and they're like, lucky shot.
Mm-hmm.
And they give him some more guff. I can't remember exactly what they say to him, but it really pisses him off. He splits their arrows again and then shoots them all dead. A dozen, 15 people, like he just shoots them dead. And he's like,
shoots them all.
Check me out. I have really good aim. So kind of a dick move, but that's not the Robin Hood we love.
And if you said that you can shoot 12 arrows in a minute, so like he took like a full 90 seconds to just kind of like shoot these guys. What were the other guys doing?
They were running away and crying.
Yeah.
And saying, sorry, bro. You don't suck, bro.
Yeah.
There's a lot of bros back then, the medieval times. Recent versions of the tale make Robin Hood a hero to the poor, like you said before. And remember, back in medieval times, most people were poor, right? Nobility, and then, you know, like peasants.
Yeah.
That was the biggest class, was the peasantry class. So that's really the most beloved version of Robin Hood. He's the guy who saves Will Scarlet from hanging, who never hurts a woman, who fights back against the establishment to like make life better for the little guy. That's the Robin Hood we love. But beyond the stories, the folk tales, the myths, I would actually argue it's the idea of Robin Hood that saves lives. So was there a real Robin Hood? Probably not. It's very unlikely that there was this one charismatic outlaw named Robin Hood who stole from the rich, gave to the poor, and that he like actually lived. Robin Hood was more likely a name used by many outlaws over the years. He was an idea. He was someone who represented hope. He was the 99%, man. Like, you know, he is us. He represents us. So imagine this. It's the end of the movie when there's a castle. It's like completely surrounded by the sheriff's men, you know, and there's scared yet brave members of the crowd. And they slowly stand in like, I'm Robin Hood. No, I'm Robin Hood. Yeah, me too. I'm Robin Hood. Hey, I guess you're going to have to arrest all of us. You got to go through all of us to get to him. Then the actual Robin Hood like looks on with like tears in his eyes, and like his friends and his neighbors are like, we love you, Robin Hood. And they all cheer and they live happily ever after.
Yeah.
Like that's the Robin Hood that we love. And that's the one with the idea of hope that truly saves lives. So that's a story we can all get behind. That's the type of story that helps people push through like really hard times, helps them stand up for what they believe in, even when it feels like there's absolutely zero chance. That's why we love Robin Hood. And that's why people have been telling his tales of this outlaw and his band of merry men for centuries. And I think that's why they're going to continue to tell his tales for centuries. That and Robin Hood's actually in the public domain, so it's free. So if we count up all of these tally marks, we have 7 out of 10 on our special formula.
I think that means Robin Hood is a superhero.
What kind of superhero is he?
He is a mean Lincoln Green arrow shooting machine.
That's really good. I like that. Yeah, absolutely. And so on our scale, Robin Hood is a superhero that can save a cart full of orphan cheesemakers.
Or other dairy manufacturers. Before we go, unless you have something else, I have a random Robin Hood related tale.
I would love to hear it.
On March 13th, 1953, during the height of the McCarthy era, Robin Hood and his band of merry outlaws made headlines.
How do they make headlines?
Mrs. Thomas J. White of the Indiana Textbook Commission called for a ban of Robin Hood in all school books for promoting communism because he stole from the rich to give to the poor.
Oh, he was the original socialist.
As a Republican member of the commission, Mrs. Thomas J. White, who was never referenced by her first name, defended her position by stating that there is a communist directive in education now to stress the story of Robin Hood. They want to stress it because he robbed the rich and gave it to the poor. That's the communist line. It's just a smearing of law and order, and anything that disrupts law and order is their meat.
Wow.
So according to the Republicans in America in the 1950s, this tale from, what would we say, the 1400s?
Even before that, it was like the 12th century.
12th century in England, that's communist directive.
McCarthy gets him every time. Well, let that be a lesson to all of us, really. I mean, corporate taxes, you're next, right?
Yeah.
Just put Robin Hood on the case.
He's a superhero in my eyes.
All right, super friends, thanks for joining us on another episode of Superhero or Not.
You can find us at superheroornot.com.
And we'll see you back at the Fortress of Ratitude. Well, it's over.